I woke up in darkness, the familiar weight of fear pressing down on my chest. My heart thudded in my ears, but I couldn't remember how I'd gotten back into my bed. The walls of my apartment felt too close, the air too thick, like the house had folded in on itself. The stale, suffocating silence was broken only by the sound of my own breath, shallow and strained. The diary was on the floor beside me. I hadn't placed it there. I reached out to grab it, my fingers trembling as I held the leather-bound book in my hands. As soon as my skin touched the cover, a cold, electric pulse surged through me as though the book itself were alive, breathing, waiting for me. I opened it to the last page, dreading what I might find. You're still here. You will always be here. The ink twisted and curled, each word crawling across the page like a living thing. I stared at it for what felt like hours. My mind tried to make sense of the words, but none of it made sense anymore. The voice, the whispers, they had taken root inside me. I could feel them in my skin, in my bones. And that terrible presence, the one I had felt in the dark, it was still with me, lingering like a shadow I couldn't escape. I had to leave, but I couldn't. The door was locked, the windows sealed shut. I was trapped. The diary had become a part of me, its words now etched into my very soul, twisting, manipulating my thoughts. Every time I tried to think of escaping, the words in the diary echoed in my mind. You are mine. I could feel the weight of those words in the air, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I heard the soft patter of footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing, just the same empty room, the same oppressive silence. But it wasn't really silence, was it? The whispers were there, in the corners of my mind, in the walls of the room, in the very fabric of the apartment. I could hear them, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. I wasn't alone. I wasn't alone, and I hadn't been for days. Weeks? Time had become meaningless. Every moment felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And then a voice, clear and distinct, cut through the chaos of whispers. Are you scared? I froze. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't a whisper. It was a voice I knew all too well. Lena. My heart stopped. Lena had been my best friend since childhood, a steady presence in my life when everything else felt like it was falling apart. She was the one person I could always rely on, but she hadn't been around lately. In fact, I hadn't seen her in weeks. I hadn't even thought about her. She was gone. I turned around slowly, the room suddenly feeling too small, the air too thick. There, standing in the doorway, was Lena. Her eyes were black, the pupils completely swallowed by an inky void that seemed to suck in all light. Her face was pale, her expression blank. Her lips, once so full of life, were now drawn into a thin, twisted smile. Lena, I whispered, my voice hoarse. I reached out to her, but she didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me with those dark, soulless eyes. You shouldn't have opened it, she said, her voice now distorted, as if it were being spoken through 1,000 different mouths. Open what? Lena, what's happening? I could feel my breath coming faster now, panic creeping in. The room seemed to grow darker around me, the shadows stretching, reaching toward her. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. You've already seen too much. Lena's voice continued, now a low growl, like the sound of the earth itself groaning beneath its own weight. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What's going on?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, her fingers curling into claws, and before I could react, she lunged at me. Her hand closed around my wrist, her fingers icy cold, like death itself. And then I felt it, the pull. It wasn't just Lena. It was everything. The room, the walls, the air, they were all pulling me, dragging me deeper into something I couldn't see, something I didn't understand. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, like the apartment was no longer solid, no longer real. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Lena's smile, wide and filled with malice. I woke up in the darkness again, but this time it wasn't my apartment. I was lying on cold stone, surrounded by towering walls made of jagged rock. The air was damp and thick with the smell of decay. It was a place I couldn't recognize, but somehow I knew it. The diary was in my hands. I didn't know how it had gotten there, but there it was. The last page stared up at me, and the words had changed again. "You've crossed the threshold. There's no way back." I didn't understand. None of it made sense, but I could feel it now, the presence. It was all around me, waiting, watching. The shadows stretched out from the corners of the room, creeping closer, forming shapes that were barely perceptible, shapes that weren't human. I tried to stand, but my legs gave way, and I collapsed back onto the cold stone floor. And then I heard the voice again. The whispers had stopped, replaced by something else, something far worse. "It's time to go home." The walls shifted, groaning as if they were alive. The stone moved, forming a path, a door. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. It felt like a dream, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But the door was there, opening in front of me, revealing a black void beyond. A place where the shadows lived. A place where I had been trapped all along. With no other choice, I stepped through the door. And the last thing I heard before everything went silent was Lena's voice. "You were always mine. Always." In that final moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't escaping. I was never meant to escape. The last page in the diary was never meant to be read. It was meant to trap me, to seal me within the darkness. And now, I was a part of it, a part of the shadows, a part of the whispering, waiting forever, just like the others before me. I was never meant to leave. I had already crossed the threshold. I was home,